What is up, everybody? Greetings and salutations. It is E. Spencer Kyte here on the SevereMMA YouTube page with one question for every fight for UFC 282, the final pay-per-view of 2022, the penultimate event of the year. As you can tell, I am fired up. I just finished putting my notes together for this. I'm prepping for the preview that we're going to tape later today. I'm just jazzed for this. I am fired up about this fight card. This is an intriguing fight card to me. I don't think the level of overall fights is necessarily the same as last week. I liked last week's card a little bit more just in terms of the divisional ramifications and some of the answers to questions that we were going to get. But this is a pretty goddamn good card, especially given that we lost the main event. And so we're just going to dive right into it. The new main event, Jan Blachowicz, Magomed Ankalaev for the vacant light heavyweight title. And my question is Ankalaev ready to be a champion? I know that sounds like a weird question for a guy that's on a 9-fight winning streak and a guy that for probably over a year now, year and a half now, I've been saying this might be the best light heavyweight in the UFC because of the full skill set, because of the arsenal he brings to the table, because of the various ways he's able to get a fight done and win fights. But there's a difference between being super skilled and ready to win these fights and excelling in these moments. And this is the thing we're going to find out on Saturday, right? Some of these bigger opportunities that he's gotten as he's worked his way up the competitive ladder, we've seen more measured approach. We've seen him sort of dial back some of the offense, not to play it safe, but to play it smart. I don't have any problem with that. I don't fault him at all for being smart and playing to his advantages, right? Taking Thiago Santos down and grinding him out on the ground. Why do you want to stand with Maheta, who can hit you with one of those big ass kicks or smash you with a hand and then you're done? He's got Mjolnir on his chest. Like, I ain't standing with that guy. I get it. But now he's in there with a former champion in Jan Blachowicz, a guy that has been to the top of the mountain, fallen off, and now on his attempt to get back to the top of that mountain. And this is a tough fight. This is the experience part and the moment part that I don't think we talk about enough in terms of how difficult it is to thrive in this, how challenging it is for these champions that have these long runs to constantly get up and go through all of the things that being in the main event of a pay-per-view puts you through. It's more media. It's more everything, especially, and you look at this fight, this goes from 3 to 5 rounds. So there's that change on a couple weeks notice. And now they've had about, I think it's 3 or 4 weeks, 3 weeks to acclimate to this and get ready for this. And I know Ankalaev, same as everybody else that's in this position, trains for these situations, and they're not just going 3 rounds in the gym. They're going 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, whatever it may be. But this is different. This is nut cutting time. This is all the attention is on you. You're the guy on a 9-fight winning streak. You're the guy that a lot of people, myself included, have talked about being a potential champion. And now it's time to prove it. Now it's time to go out there and face the guy that has already done it. And what's interesting to me, or the reason this is my question, is because I didn't have any concerns about that with Islam Makhachev, because there was that air of confidence, that brashness to Makhachev in a very, very good way, where you knew this guy was ready for these moments. You knew he was ready to be in the spotlight. I was fortunate enough to talk to Islam throughout this rise. And every time we spoke, I would ask him, is the way you're getting to this point and how successful you've been and how easy it has been in terms of beating these very good fighters in relatively one-sided fashion, surprising at all to you? Is it at all catch you off guard? Did you think it would be more difficult? And he would always just say, no, brother, this is what it was always going to be. I'm going to smash all of these guys. Ankalaev isn't that guy. And again, I've spoken with him throughout this rise, and he's always been confident that he would get here, but there's not that brashness. There's not that. And look, some of that is personality. Some of that is Islam working very closely with Khabib, who I'm sure is in his ear saying, listen, brother, you've got to sell yourself. You've got to say these things this way to really sort of get over. Ankalaev is much more reserved. He's not going to come out and say, I'm better than all of these fools. None of this is surprising. But he can do that in his performance on Saturday. And if he does, it will answer this question for me. This, to me, as a fight, can go a few different ways, as most can. Ankalaev can go out and be smart in this fight and use his wrestling and make this a grind and make this a grimy fight that just sort of wears on Jan Blachowicz. He can also go out and strike, right? He's got those rangy kicks. He's got good size. He's got a full arsenal of tools. I think the way he approaches this fight, more than anything, is what's going to answer this question for me. Because if he's ready to be champion and have a lengthy reign at that, he goes out and he fights smart. He goes out and he mixes things up and he throws variety at Jan Blachowicz, and he mixes in wrestling and he mixes in takedowns, and he understands that I've got 25 minutes to work, so I've got to avoid the power. That's the one thing I really can't put myself in range of, is that big legendary Polish power. A finish would be amazing. A finish here sort of eliminates any of the questions, right? It should have been that way with the Anthony Smith fight, but Anthony Smith jacked up his leg, and so that, or his ankle, or whatever it was, and that sort of took some of the shine off of that performance. But as I say all the time, you do not win 9 consecutive fights in the UFC against whoever the competition is if you are not an exceptionally skilled fighter. Magomed Ankalaev is an exceptionally skilled fighter, and I want to find out on Saturday if that skilled fighter is ready to be champion. New co-main event fired up for this one. Paddy the Baddy Pimblett versus Jared Flash Gordon. My question is, how good is Paddy the Baddy? This is the question everybody wants answered, right? This is the one we've been asking from the get-go. And we here at SevereMMA have had our own opinions about it, especially everyone else that has seen Paddy rise through Cage Warriors and seen some of those fights and those losses and understand that Paddy's 27 and not 23. And he's had a wealth of experience as opposed to being somebody that's 10, 12, 15 fights in. Some people feel too high on him, right? Some of the mainstream audience that has gotten on board just through this UFC run, that have attached themselves to the popularity and the charisma, which is undeniable, are maybe a little bit higher on him. There are some of us that are probably a little too low on him, that are discounting his abilities or dismissing his potential or how high he could climb based on those losses we saw earlier in his career, or some of the mistakes that we've seen in these fights in the UFC against lesser competition. And that's why this fight, this matchup, is so important for Paddy. This is the one that is the measuring stick. You lose this, and that shine gets dull real quick, right? You go from being, Paddy is always going to be an entertainer. He is always going to be marketable and a draw to a certain extent. But this is the fight where we get closer to seeing if he can have some of those big fights, if he can headline London, or does he have to stay in a secondary role for that because the level of competition that he can face just isn't going to get there. Jared Gordon is a very good fighter. He has sort of figured out where he fits in this division, right? We know who Jared Gordon is. You look at the results over the last couple of fights. The loss is Grant Dawson. Well, Grant Dawson is a top 15 fighter in this division, or very damn close. And so for Paddy, this is kind of that measuring stick. This is that litmus test, right? Can you go out and beat the 34-year-old veteran who has never climbed into the top 15, who hasn't actually, and I say this with all due respect to Jared Gordon, who I'm friendly with, had a great conversation with ahead of this fight for a story that's up on the UFC website now, hasn't been close to breaking into the top 15, right? Historically has lost to the best competition he's faced in the UFC. Now we're going to find out if Paddy is part of that group or part of the group of guys that Jared Gordon can beat. And I think for me, I don't even necessarily think that this is the final answer on Paddy, because I think the best version of Jared Gordon can beat Paddy and there still be a road back for Paddy. But it's going to take making some of those decisions that we talk about regularly that I don't know that Paddy wants to make in order for him to get there. If he loses this fight, if he goes out and wins and he looks great again and he gets another finish and we get all the stuff that we've gotten thus far, then we're just going to carry on. And we just put him in there with another name. Next time out, a bigger name, a more established guy. And we just keep seeing. But this is the one. This is what we've been waiting for. This is what we've wanted to see. And we're getting to see it. And it's going to be on pay-per-view. And we're going to get the walkout. I'm really interested to see what the walkout is like in Las Vegas as opposed to the last couple times in London. It's always been electric. He has that undeniable magnetic charisma. I want to see how that plays this week. And then I want to see how he does on Saturday night. Welterweight fight, Santiago Ponzinibbio facing off against Alex Morono, originally supposed to be Robbie Lawler. Morono officially stepping in for this fight. And my question is, can Morono pull a Dolidze? So last week, Roman Dolidze raised his hand, said, I will replace Derek Brunson opposite Jack Hermanson, goes out and gets a second round stoppage win. As I said in the lead to that fight, and with Harry on the takeaways coming out of that fight, that was why I thought it made a lot of sense for Dolidze to say, yep, I'm here. I'll do this. You go out, you beat Jack Hermanson. Now he's in the top 10. I believe he came out at number 8 in the updated rankings today. If you lost to a top 10 guy. No harm, no foul. Still had 2 good wins this year, 2 stoppage wins this year, and then you lost on short notice to a top 10 guy. Still would have went into 2023 with a bunch of momentum. Now it's just even more. So Morono steps up here for Robbie Lawler, who withdrew for undisclosed reasons as of right now. Hope everything's okay. Hope we still get to see Rob Lawler one more time. Morono's one of those guys that I don't think we quite fully appreciate how good he is. I know Harry and I talked about it on the takeaways after his last fight with Matthew Semmelsberger. He's won 4 straight. He is the quintessential second 15 guy in this division. And he's probably towards the top end of that second, or the top half of that second 15, because he knows who he is, right? He knows he needs to mix things up. He needs to be a rangy striker. He needs to work in and out. It's got to be volume because he doesn't have big power. He's got to mix in grappling when he can because he is a legit black belt. He's a very good grappler, has his own school down at Gracie Baja in the Woodlands in Texas. And so he knows who he is, and we don't think of him as somebody that's maybe even in this category with Santiago Ponzinibbio and some of these top 15 guys or guys that have been ranked in the past. I don't think Ponzinibbio is ranked right now because he's 1-3 since coming back, right? And Ponzinibbio is a guy to me that I have a lot of sympathy for. He was on a 7-fight winning streak, capped by a very good win over Neil Magny, and then he lost 2 years of his career. He had injuries, he had infections, he had illnesses. They weren't sure if he was going to be able to fight, and he battled his way back. But he just hasn't been the same, right? It was the tail end of his quote-unquote athletic prime when he got sick, when he got put to the sidelines. And it's just hard to come back and reclaim that at 35, 36, as he is now. So this isn't quite Roman Dolidze and Jack Hermanson, because Ponzinibbio isn't the Joker and Alex Morono isn't Roman Dolidze. But it's one of those, it's the direct-to-DVD version of this, right? It's the no-name brand version of this, of that situation. And it's going to be really interesting to me to see how it plays out, because this is also an opportunity for Ponzinibbio to get one back, to show after back-to-back split decision losses in good fights against good fighters in Jeff Neal and Michel Pereira, that he can still be either in that lower third of the top 15 or just outside of it, where he can be a dangerous gatekeeper, a dangerous sort of barrier to that upper tier, to that last 15 guys in the division. But it's also a chance for Morono to go out and say, look, this is who I am. This is now 5 straight. I may not ever be top 10. I may not make a run at the title, but you got to give me my flowers now because I've done good things inside this octagon, and it's time to acknowledge it. Win or lose, I hope Alex Morono gets some love this week because this is a dangerous fight to take for a guy on a 4-fight winning streak that could, for all intents and purposes, just sort of sit back and wait and find the right matchup. And so let's give some love to Alex Morono, and let's see if he can pull a Dolidze on Saturday and get a big win. Middleweights, the return of Darren Till versus Dricus du Plessis. My question is it time to give up on Darren Till as a contender? Now, previously, when I was writing Keyboard Kimura on the Substack page, going into the Derek Brunson fight for Darren Till, I said that was make or break. This is his last chance to prove that he is capable of being a contender. I'm going to give him a little bit of a pass. He went into that fight apparently with a torn ACL. Never a good thing. Got out wrestled, got beaten, got finished whole 9 yards. Fine. Give you your pass on that. We'll give you the asterisks. This is the one, though. This is the one. Darren Till feels to me, and has always felt to me, like one of those guys that was, how do I put this? Artificially thought of as great. We overrated the win over Donald Cerrone in Poland. He then got a lesser version of the Conor McGregor home game when Conor fought Diego Brandao in Dublin, and it was great. Darren Till got a home game in Liverpool. It wasn't a great fight. It wasn't a great performance. I still think Stephen Thompson won that fight. And then he got thrown into a championship opportunity and he got thumped. He got shown. He got found out. He got shown to not be ready to hang with a guy like Tyron Woodley at the time. And he hasn't really recovered since, in my estimation, in my opinion. Now, he's fought good competition, losing to Robert Whittaker and Derek Brunson and getting beat by Woodley and getting clipped by Jorge Masvidal in that last London show prior to the pandemic. So 2019, the start of the year of Masvidal. Fine. Those things happen. I get it. But like, this is the one now, right? We've had enough time. Darren Till isn't a young man anymore. He turns 30 on Christmas Eve. Always seems to be injured, always seems to get hurt at the wrong time. But we still talk about him like he's right close, right? Israel Adesanya and Eugene Behrman from City Kickboxing would always talk about if Darren Till can get a win, he could be a contender. He can be the next guy in line for a title shot. Darren Till is 1-4 in his last 5 fights. And that tracks back to the welterweight title fight. So this isn't, to me, a win and we move into the title conversation. This is win and you prove you still got something to offer. Now, not that his career is going to be done if he loses to Dricus du Plessis on Saturday, because du Plessis is a hitter. He's on a good winning streak. Has a win over Roberto Soldic, who we all love, who we all think wish he would have signed with the UFC instead of won. Probably wouldn't have gotten matched up as badly. Probably would have had a chance to show out in his debut, but these are things that happen. But this is the one, man. Like, Darren Till needs to come out and show something here. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm alone in this thought. Maybe I'm on an island. It wouldn't be the first time. Certainly will not be the last time. But like, all the injuries, all the mileage, all the talk takes a toll. Puts some pressure on. Shortens that window of, or shortens the leash that he gets for figuring these things out. Because we talk about him like he's this just a hair away from being a champion, just a couple wins away from being a real contender, but we haven't seen it. I haven't seen it. Only win in the division is a split decision win over Kelvin Gastelum. And KG hasn't looked good for 3 years, 4 years. Right? Had that fight with Izzy and it was great, but it took everything out of him. Go look at what Kelvin Gastelum has done since then. Not great. And so if Darren Till goes out here and loses to Dricus du Plessis, catches a third straight loss, falls to 1-5 in his last 6 fights, we need to change the conversation we're having about him. It doesn't mean that he can't regroup at some point, right? Only 30. I know I said he is now 30, but like age is one of these things where there's still time, but there's not a lot of time, is sort of how it feels with Darren Till. There's time to make adjustments. There's time to make changes and get healthy and become the best version of yourself. But there's also not infinite time. It needs to happen this weekend. We need to see the best version of Darren Till on Saturday. And if we don't, for me, officially now, no more asterisks, no more passes. If he doesn't win on Saturday, he's done being a contender in my book. And probably a lot of other people's. Move to the featherweight division, Bryce Mitchell and Ilia Topuria. Good Lord, this is a great fight. My question is, who moves forward as a contender? Now, let me be clear for everybody that's going to be like up in arms with their interpretation of this, perhaps. Whoever loses this fight can still be a contender. This isn't a like loser leaves town. Whoever gets beaten is a pile of trash and never going to go anywhere. It's just who becomes a contender as of Sunday morning. These guys are both top 15 fighters. Bryce Mitchell is at number 8 or number 9 in the rankings. Topuria is at number 14. Topuria is undefeated. Bryce Mitchell has 1 loss in his career. Yes, the tough loss to Brad Katona counts. I know it doesn't say it on any of his records, on any of his stuff online. I'm just passing along the information as it is presented to me when I write about him for the actual company that he fights for. That's all I'm saying. 15-1, not 15-0. Don't shoot the messenger. Mitchell knows who he is. He's been excellent in the UFC. Topuria knows who he is and has been excellent in the UFC, save for the weight hiccup in January. But he turned that over by going out and knocking out Jai Herbert in London in March, up a division where he had no business being up a division and knocking out Jai Herbert. And so this is just like, this is a terrific fight. This is my favorite fight on the card by far. This is a fight that has next year's significance in the division, but also probably the next 3 years significance in the division, right? Because these two guys are part of that wave of fighters, along with Arnold Allen, along with Movsar Evloev, that are moving forward and going to carry this division as guys like Chan Sung Jung fall back, as guys like Calvin Kattar start to fall back, and Brian Ortega falls back, and Josh Emmett at some point, being in his late 30s, falls back. And if Alex Volkanovski fucks off to lightweight, wins the title, and just goes, these are guys that are going to carry this division and be in charge of this division for the next several years. And so I just want to see which one of them is going to get there starting next year. Which one of these guys moves into a position where they're facing the Calvin Kattars or the Josh Emmets or Brian Ortega when he's healthy, and which one just sticks in that holding pattern where it's Dan Ige next, as opposed to those other guys. It's going to be a hell of a fight. I cannot wait. God, what a great fight. What a great way to open the main card as well. Move to the heavyweight division, closing out the prelims. Jairzinho Rozenstruik versus Chris Daukaus. And my question is, who becomes the front runner for the next PFL heavyweight tournament? Tongue in cheek, obviously. I'm not advocating for either of these men to be released. I don't think that's going to be the case necessarily. But here's the thing. Rozenstruik is 34. Daukaus is 33. Both enter this on losing streaks. Both have lost to the best fighters they've faced in the UFC. The guys ahead of them in the division have all proven themselves to be better than these two gentlemen. This is one of those fights that I'm not sure if Shawnee's going to be on the preview. We haven't taped it yet. We're getting to that later on in the week. But it's one of those fights where Sean would say these guys are 8-9 in the division or 10-11 or whatever it is. And when this fight is done, they're going to be 8-9 in the division. And he's 100% right. Nothing changes with the outcome of this fight. You don't suddenly come away from this and think the winner is going to go on to beat Alexander Volkov. yet alone Curtis Blades, Cyril Gane, Sergey Pavlovich, or any of the three gentlemen that are always in that love triangle at the top of the division. And so it's going to be really interesting to me to see what happens with whoever comes away on the wrong side of this, because heavyweights that command more money, that have headlined, command more money, right? The big boys get paid a little more than the little fellas. And when these guys have each been put in position to headline some events, that bumps your pay a little bit. That increases the pay packet a little bit. And at a certain point, the UFC will look at them and just be like, why am I keeping around the 10th best heavyweight in perpetuity, where they're either beating some of these up and comers that we'd like to get over, that we'd like to see them move forward, or they're just constantly rolling out here. They win one and then they lose to the guys that are in front of them. Now, there's absolutely utility to having fighters like this on the roster. I'm not advocating for either of these guys to be let go, not saying there's not a place in the ecosystem for them. Absolutely is. You need fighters like this to face the upper tier guys when they're looking for a rebound, to test those young up and comers, right? These are the guys that I think should be facing Waldo Cortez Acosta next time out. Let's just get that dude to test. We've had him fight the lower tier guys. Have him, get him in here with one of these fellas. And let's just see. Because if he's good enough to beat him, we don't need to be waiting around at heavyweight and doing the 4, 5, 6 fights. So there's value to them. But I also understand the dynamics of the business side of it, and the dynamics of having a 34, 35-year-old heavyweight that just can't get over a certain point sticking around on the roster. And like, truthfully, for each of these guys, they may not want to accept this. They may not believe it to be true. They would be great additions to the heavyweight division in the PFL or Bellator or ONE. They might make more money. They might get more opportunities. They're surely going to have more winnable opportunities. The level of competition just isn't the same. Not saying it happens, but like, this is one of those, as I said, the result doesn't change anything. And so it's going to be interesting to see what the UFC does. Because one of these guys is coming away, like, worst case, best case scenario, the loser of this fight is on a 3-fight losing streak. Worst case, if you're Jairzinho, it's 4. Could we maybe see one of these guys in PFL in 2023? That's all I'm saying. Did you put this guy in, like, one of these dudes in the tournament? Let's go get $1 million. That's Brendan Loughnane how life is. Sometimes being in the UFC isn't the best thing for everybody. It's okay to admit that. We move forward. Bantamweight division, Raul Rojas Jr. versus Jay Perrin. My question is, how does Rojas handle his UFC debut? Look, this kid was, and legit, I'm not being dismissive, not doing the old man thing where I'm 44, so everybody younger than me is a kid. This gentleman just turned 18 a couple of weeks ago, like not long ago at all. He has been the center of attention since his fight on the Contender Series was announced. He was 17 at the time, won that fight, got a contract, threw him into the video game right away. That got some noise. That created some noise. That got a little bit of buzz. He's done the John Jones thing, right? My goal is to beat John Jones's record. He, unlike some of the others that have talked about it, has a load of time. It's well over 5 years, as I said, just turned 18. So he's got to go to 23 years old in 242 days. Yes, I know that from memory. But like, this is, and look, Jay Perrin isn't thrown in. You're not getting thrown into the deep end here against Jay Perrin, who is 0-2 in the UFC, put up a reasonable fight against Mario Batista in his short notice debut, put up a okay effort in a loss to Ricky Ling last time out, where his third round was his best round. So if he can just build on that and get out of first gear earlier, he becomes a little more interesting. And like, I don't think this is, one and done or any of those things, but this is a big difference between walking out at the Apex for Contender Series and walking out at T-Mobile, where there's going to be even if it's half full by the time this fight takes place. And it's second to last on the prelims. So we're not going to have full capacity, everybody roaring, right? This isn't going to be Orlando last weekend. This is a Vegas show. People show up late. The front rows don't fill up until the main card at least. But it's still a great big different thing. The week is different. There's so much more that goes into it. He's going to get attention, both domestically and internationally. I just want to see how this kid handles it. He's a kid. He's 18 years old. When I was 18, I was finishing high school. This dude's going to fight in the UFC. Like, this is crazy. I just want to see it. It's a good test. It's the right. I'm so happy that the UFC hasn't done anything asinine here and thrown him in with somebody way above his skill level, way above his experience level. This is a good fight. This is a good test. Let's slow play the hell out of this and take our absolute time. But this first one is going to tell us a little something about this kid. If he goes out and shines, and I said he was one of my fighters in Fighters on the Rise this week on the UFC website. I said in there, he's the first guy for me in a while, or of any of them, truthfully, that might have an actual chance to beat Jon Jones's record just because his window is so large. It's 5.5 years. A lot can change in 5.5 years, and he's already a good fighter. So if he gets more experience and gets more coaching, better training partners, grows into his body more, develops more strength, develops the skills that he has, maybe he can get there. It's a huge ask. I think it's ridiculous for any of these people to set that as a goal for themselves. And maybe that says more about me than it does about them, but it's putting a challenge in front of you that is crazy. Go out and win this fight. Go show that you can thrive on this level. Then let's start talking about some other stuff. Looking forward to it though. Really interesting story. Hope it gets and he gets a little bit of attention this week. Next up, middleweights, Edmund Shahbazyan and Dulce Lungiambula. My question is, what will Shahbazyan look like after a year away and shifting to a new camp? Right? We all remember Edmund Shahbazyan comes off Contender Series, 3 straight wins in the UFC. The last one of a first-round knockout over Brad Tavares. He is, as his nickname, the Golden Boy. He was in his very early 20s. He was coming out of Glendale Fighting Club. He had the history with Ronda Rousey, where he was a training partner, kind of sparring dummy at times in some of her media workouts. We saw all of those clips. It was great. It was a lovely story. And then he lost 3 straight, and every single one of them were ugly. 2 of them were stoppages to Derek Brunson and Nasruddin Imavov. There was a decision loss to Jack Hermanson in between there, and it was ugly. Jack Hermanson beat the shit out of him. And so he's now taken a year away. He switched gyms. He is at Extreme Couture. He's still just 25. Like, this is, I don't know that I've been more curious to see a fighter return than I am to see Edmund Shahbazyan back in there on Saturday. Because, as my notes say, this could be another Dominic Reyes situation. Right? Going into Dominic Reyes' fight with Ryan Spann a couple of weeks ago, my question was, is Dominic Reyes just broken? Right? Lost that fight to Jon Jones, and it just hasn't been the same since. He's just, the wiring's permanently screwed up. And we saw that. He went out, got knocked out by Ryan Spann. It was ugly. It's now 4 straight losses. Hope Dom is doing better, but he's never going to be the guy that he was that night that he damn near beat, and truthfully, in my opinion, should have beaten Jon Jones on the scorecard. Edmund Shahbazyan could be in that place, right? You take 3 bad beatings like that, it's hard to shake. I'm super excited and super proud of him and his people for getting him a year away and for switching gyms, recognizing that he needed to be somewhere else, get to a place where there's a bunch of very good middleweights and big bodies that he can work with and very good coaches, not just Eric Nixick, who is a friend and has been on this program and I talk about regularly, but Dennis Davis, Ray Sefo, Dewey Cooper slides in there every once in a while. There's lots of people to work with in that gym. The matchup is a favorable one. Dolce Lungiambula is hittable. He's beatable. But like, he's got a little bit of pop. You make a couple mistakes and you can get cracked. The nice thing for Shahbazyan is that Dolce stopped over at XC for one point. That's where he was training before he moved south to go down there. So they've got some experience with him. They know what he does well, what he doesn't do well, what to look out for, what you got to worry about. So this is very much a winnable fight. But how this happens is going to tell us a lot about not just where Edmund Shahbazyan is now, but what is reasonable to expect going forward. Again, he's just 25, just turned 25. Still a load of time, and he's got good wins. We've seen the good version of this kid. Can we see it again? That's what we're going to find out. That's what we're going to see over this next year, over these next couple fights starting on Saturday. Has to show that he can get back to just getting his hand raised and that he's made some of the adjustments that he needed to make. We'll see. Sticking in the middleweight division, sticking with a fighter from Extreme Couture, Chris Curtis against Joaquin Buckley. My question is, why does the UFC do stuff like this? Why? I hate this fight in terms of the utilization of these athletes. I love it because it should be a fun, entertaining, spirited contest, right? These two dudes will chirp at each other a little bit. They'll smile and give each other the little finger points. They'll be throwing bombs at each other. Buckley does crazy shit. Like, let's go. Great fight in terms of entertainment. Hate it because no matter what happens, one of these two dudes comes out of here on a 2-fight losing streak. And at middleweight, there's no reason to burn a fighter like this onto a 2-fight losing streak for no advancement. This is another one of those fights. This is the good version of one of those fights where it doesn't really change a lot. Neither of them are ranked. They're both coming off losses. 2 ranked fighters, right? 2 ranked competition. Chris Curtis lost to Jack Hermanson. Buckley lost to Nasruddin Imavov. So there's no shame in that. But like, why does one of these guys have to end the year on a 2-fight losing streak? There's no reason for it. There's not enough talent at middleweight to have one of these two dudes who are both just outside of the top 15 heading into next year on a 2-fight skid when there's so many other dudes you could have paired them off with as like the veteran experienced test for somebody climbing the ranks. Like one of these dudes against Andre Petrosky. Sign me up. One of these dudes against Gregory Robocop Rodriguez when his face is all healed and the vein is tucked back in his head and he's ready to return. Makes way more sense to me than having these two guys face each other now, where we end up just sticking one of them on a 2-fight slide and they've got to move further down the line. This is how we keep screwing up divisions and getting to positions where there's nobody to move forward and nobody wants to move back either. Do better. Figure out different matchups. Love the fight in terms of entertainment. Hate the utilization of those athletes. Next up, we go to the featherweight division. Billy Quarantillo versus Alexander Hernandez. And so my question is, does featherweight change anything for Alexander Hernandez? So if you will remember, prior to this, Alexander Hernandez has been fighting at lightweight. He has been consistently inconsistent, right? Over his last 8 fights, he's alternated wins and losses. That goes back to his sophomore effort in the UFC, which was a win over PFL millionaire Olivier Aubin-Mercier, was then Donald Cerrone, and then it's been win-loss, win-loss, win-loss the rest of the way. My immediate thought is that no, moving to featherweight doesn't change anything for him because it's not like he goes down and he's suddenly great, bigger than everybody else. Billy Quarantillo is the same as, I believe, an inch taller and has the same reach. It's not like he goes down and is supremely faster than anybody or supremely stronger than anybody, though we'll see. Secretly, I think people kind of overrate Alexander Hernandez. I think people are anchored to that debut win over Beneil Dariush. And now anchoring is a term that gets used in fantasy sports. I play a lot of fantasy sports. I listen to fantasy sports podcasts. These things creep into my lexicon. So anchoring is a thing where you see a player ranked at a certain position, and that's the number you always hold in your head. Well, they're a top 50 guy. And I think people look at that win over Beneil Dariush and getting into a big fight with Donald Cerrone in his third fight where he was the favorite. And they go, but this guy's supposed to be good. Like, this guy was ranked at lightweight at one point. He's really good. And he's young and he's just got to figure it out. And he's had some ups and downs. I don't think Alexander Hernandez is actually that good. I don't think he was ever that good. I don't throw out lucky punch, fluke, all of that stuff. He knocked out Beneil Dariush. It happens. Shit happens. Guys get caught. Sometimes guys that are much better fighters lose to lesser fighters. Beneil Dariush is not the first or last. And so I just think there's that people are clinging to this idea about him as if he is still just a fight away. And look, I'm the guy that does Fighter I Can't Quit. So I understand this 100%. He's just not one of my guys. And so I'm going to be a little more cavalier about it and a little more open about it. But I just think there's a legion of people that believe this guy is just a step away. And I don't think going to featherweight changes anything. We know who Billy Quarantillo is. He's a tough bastard. He's a tough out. This is going to be a hard fight for Alexander Hernandez, who looked good to start against Renato Moicano and then couldn't adjust when Moicano made adjustments and got choked out last time. Now look, Manny Moicano, very good fighter in both the featherweight division before he went up and now at lightweight. Quality opponent. It's not like he's losing to scrubs, right? Hernandez. It's Cowboy. It's Thiago Moises. It's Drew Dober. It's Renato Moicano. Those are good fighters. At the time, all guys that are in the lower third of the top 15 or just outside of it. So he's not losing to bums, but he's also not beaten anybody yet. Outside of that win over Dariush, way back at the start of his career, on short notice, when he did the douchebag fake glove touch, throw a punch kind of thing, where I sit and I go, yeah, man, this guy got something. But I think a lot of people still think this guy's got something. And so we're going to find out on Saturday if going down to featherweight unlocks some of that, brings some of that back, changes my thoughts on him, is the key to starting a little run. It's a tough fight. Billy Q is going to be in his grill, going to be in his face. He's a tough out. As I said, he can throw. He'll get after you. We'll see what happens. We stick around the featherweight division. We get TJ Brown versus Eric Silva. My question is, why slow play Eric Silva like this? So King Eric Silva, graduate of the Contender Series this year, this fall. He's 35. He turns 36 in March. So like, what are we doing? Like, there's no reason to lead him into shallow waters like this against the guy in TJ Brown, who is 2-3 in the UFC, should be 1-4, and probably gets released if he loses this fight. And again, not being a dick, not advocating for, just stating fact, just reality. And so like, what are we doing? This guy hasn't fought anybody of real great substance. Featherweight is, loaded with talent. What are we doing? Why are we bringing him along slow and seeing, and like the challenge of this, right? The rub of this is that if he loses to TJ Brown, then what do you do? So maybe that's the reason, right? Maybe you bring him out and you see if he can just go out and put a highlight on TJ Brown. That's a possibility. We've seen it earlier this year with some Contender Series grads from last year. Karine Silva did it earlier this year. That's one that sticks out to me. So maybe that's what it is, right? Maybe this is the featherweight version of giving Waldo Cortez Acosta fights against Jake Collier and fights against Chase Sherman. And we want to see if he can go out and just put it on. Jared Vandera, not Jake Collier. I get all of the middle of the main card heavyweights that they roll through confused sometimes. So maybe that's what this is. Maybe this is, let's let this guy that has finished a bunch of fights in a row, had a dominant performance on Contender Series that we can show the highlight of, go out and put it on TJ Brown, who we know the level that he's at. Sure. Really sucks if it backfires. Really sucks if he doesn't look that good, because then what do you do? To me, personally, I'd have him in there with Billy Quarantillo. Go out and beat Billy Q, and then instantly you're in that mid-pack, maybe third 15 in the division, somewhere in there, where there's some excitement, and you've done something that's got me excited and that I'm amped up for, I'm keyed up for. Because then I can say, okay, he's 35, going to be 36 in March. But like, he's already got a really great win over Billy Q. Beating TJ Brown doesn't do anything for me. This is, yes, it's the most experienced guy he's faced and a guy that's got a couple of wins in the UFC. Great. It's a good win. Sure, go forward. It doesn't suddenly make me think that this dude is running through the division. And so unless this is just, let's establish him as an action fighter in the lower half of the division, I don't get this matchup. I don't get slow playing a 35-year-old that has limited experience against limited competition. Get him in there. This is one of those instances where you just huck him in the deep end and see if he can swim. I'm not saying like top 15 deep end. That's crazy shit. But as I said, Billy Q's on this card. That would be the fight for me. Somebody like that. Let's just see. Beating TJ Brown doesn't do anything for me. So we'll see what happens. And losing to him is just disaster, right? Losing to him is just, oof, Jesus. Then we really got to have conversations about who's getting contracts coming off of Contender Series. We're going to have that conversation anyways. I'm going to write about it or podcast about it at some point during the December to January break, during the Christmas holidays of the UFC. But Jesus, it could get real bad here in the last 2 weeks of this year. Vinicius Salvador, speaking of which, versus Daniel Da Silva. My question here is, can we just move on from guys once they're 0-3 or worse in the UFC? Like, Harry's already mad. We were talking about this fight card earlier today, sort of talking about who we like and what we like and how good is this card. And I was like, look, Daniel Da Silva's on this card. And he was like, don't say anything bad about him. He's a mad old bastard. Yes, he is. He's also 0-3 in the UFC. He's been finished in all three of those, the last two in the first round. So like, what are we doing? What are we doing? Like, just why are we keeping, and look, as always, I'm not advocating for people not to get opportunities. I'm not advocating for people to get released or be cut, because I know and I understand the ramifications that come with not competing at this level, right? This is life-changing stuff for a lot of these men and women. Even if people are going to snicker and be like, how is being at the bottom of the division life-changing stuff for anybody? It is. It truly is. And we need to stop fucking about and pretending that it's not, and just being like mega critical all the fucking time. But like, he's 0-3 in the UFC. And he's not 21 or 22 and just getting started. He's 26. He's had 15 pro fights. Like, there's other people that need these opportunities. There's better fighters than Daniel Da Silva that should get these opportunities. And now again, similar to the Eric Silva fight, if this is to get Vinicius Salvador, who again is a graduate of Contender Series this year, coming off a good win there, this is an opportunity to get him out there and get him a highlight to start his career. Fine. It doesn't change my impression of Salvador. It doesn't tell us anything about this guy. At least it doesn't tell me. I don't come away from this and go, man, no, he beat a guy that's 0-3. He beat a guy that has shown, that has given us evidence that he cannot compete at this level. I want to see fighters that can compete at this level. I'm not saying everybody has to win all the time. I'm not saying people don't deserve opportunities, right? All of these Contender Series grads, I want to see them get their chance. They earned their way here. They were given an opportunity. They are 0-0 in the octagon. Let's get them some fights and see if they belong. But when they show us that they can't, we need to move on and get people that can some of these opportunities, and get people that are having success on the regional circuit some of these opportunities. rather than just sticking with these athletes that repeatedly show they can't win, right? There's a bunch of guys on this card. There's a bunch of B-sides in these fights. And I'm going to scroll back up through my list here because it's Dulce Lungiambula. It's Jay Perrin. It's TJ Brown to a lesser extent. It's De Silva here. The results aren't good if you add them all up. There's maybe 3 wins between them, 4 wins between them. Lungiambula's got 1. TJ Brown's got 2. 3 wins between those 4 athletes and a whole grip of losses. We need to move on faster. We need to not just keep bringing guys out there. It doesn't do those athletes and it doesn't do the company any good. This is the other part. It doesn't do you as the UFC any good for Vinicius Salvador to be the 4th guy that beats Daniel De Silva. Move on. Get somebody better in there with him. And if it is, again, if it's just to get him the highlight, there's somebody else that he can beat. And if he's good enough to put up a highlight, let him do it by beating somebody of substance, not somebody that's just a warm fucking body. You're the UFC. There shouldn't be warm bodies. That's it, right? Like there just shouldn't be. Opening fight of the event, Cameron Saaiman, another guy from the Contender Series, facing Stephen Koslow, a short notice replacement for Ronnie Lawrence. My question here is, where does Obi-Wan Shinobi the Pillow, which is Stephen Koslow's nickname, fit in the pantheon of terrible nicknames? My argument here is that it's the worst nickname I've ever heard. I saw this the first time when I was having to put this fight together for the Fight by Fight preview over on UFC.com. And I thought it was just a joke, right? I thought it was just a mistake. Somebody fucked around with this Tapology page. Nope. Turns out it's real. And it is horrible. And like that's saying something because there are terrible nicknames up and down this sport. Throughout the annals of MMA history, there have been some terrible nicknames. And it's amazing to me that no one in this boy's life was like, hey man, just pick one of those things. Like just be Obi-Wan Kenobi, go with Shinobi. Loved that game as a kid growing up on Sega, stand-up arcade game, ninjas, all in. The Pillow, okay. I put you to sleep, right? I get it. But when you put all 3 together, it's like sometimes foods that you love independent of one another don't taste good all together. That's what this feels like as a nickname. And the worst thing is that it honestly takes away from this fight, which is an interesting fight between 2 interesting young fighters. Both are 6-0. Koslow won his last 10 fights as an amateur. So he's won 16 straight fights overall. They've got a bunch of finishes between them. Cameron Saaiman looked great on Contender Series as a 22, 23-year-old kid from South Africa. Trains with Dricus du Plessis, who's on this card. Like this is an interesting fight, but this dude's nickname is so goddamn awful that I can't see past it. And if me, the guy that can see past most things, can't see past your terrible nickname and is just already cringing and like feeling the chicken skin from Bruce Buffer saying it on Saturday night, you got to change it. You got to fix it up. Somebody needs to get in his ear and just be like, look, man, pick one. Go with Obi-Wan Shinobi even. That's kind of cool. Mix up the Jedi and the Ninja video game. Cool. Terrible nickname. By the way, hit me up in the comments or on Twitter with your picks for like the worst nicknames ever. This is up there. This is up there, but I want to see what everybody else thinks. That's it for the questions. That's it for UFC 282. I am still pumped up. As much as this nickname annoys me and the last couple of these were kind of downers, I'm still pumped up about this card. This is a very good fight card. It's a intriguing event. I can't wait to see it. I can't wait to get into the 10 things I like, to preview with the boys later this week, to come out and just knock out some picks and plays towards the end of the week and just see this action hit the octagon on Saturday. It should be a great card. I hope you enjoyed this video as always. Hit me up in the comment section if you did, if you didn't, if there's things you liked, if there's things you want to see improved. I take all of that stuff to heart. So let us know. Sign up for the SevereMMA Patreon, severemma.com/pints, the best URL in the business. It's a $5. You get a load of content. It is amazing stuff. Check out all the work everybody's doing on this channel, on the website itself. Tons of great coverage earlier in the week from the Cage Legacy show, over the weekend, I should say, from the Cage Legacy show. We had some recap stuff about the UFC event in Orlando, the big show, myself and Harry on the takeaways. Lots of good stuff coming. Keep checking it out. Keep supporting it. We really do appreciate it. Appreciate all the time you put into us and for us. We will continue to try to deliver for you. Until next week, we love you. We appreciate you. Be good to yourself. Be good to one another. We'll see you soon.